10. History. Ruling alongside the pharaoh Akhenaten from 1353 to 1336 BC. Queen Nefertiti, aka the Lady of Grace, aka Hereditary Princess, was born in 1370 BCE. She was born in the Egyptian city of Thebes, and she was only 15 years old when she married the 16-year-old Akhenaten. She worshipped the sun god Aten, and alongside her young husband, she built a new capital city called Amarna, and she also created a new religion, so how's that? She ruled over what's considered the wealthiest period in Egypt history. Nefertiti had 6 children, which were all daughters, which may have had something to do with why we don't know much about her today, but I'll get into that much later on. Number 9. Her death. After changing Egypt's religious and political structure, soaring to new heights as a woman in the Egyptian court, the queen just vanished, just like that. And on this video, we're going to try and figure out what may have happened to her. During the 12th year of the 17 that her husband ruled for, historical records seem to have just wiped out the queen's legacy. She was gone from everything. Many believe that she didn't actually die, but rather she disguised herself and continued to rule. The next in line after Akhenaten's reign was the pharaoh Smenkhare. Was that really Nefertiti in disguise? I hope so. That would be pretty sweet if we proved that and figured that out. I'm really rooting for that. The reason we believe that she may have disguised herself as a man is because of the female pharaoh Hatshepsut, because they ruled with a fake beard in the 15th century. It's known that they had a big traditional fake beard. It's cool. It's like kind of flashy. I kind of want one. I can't grow a beard or a mustache, so I kind of want a fake one myself. Lastly, there's a theory that the reason Nefertiti was banished was because she couldn't produce a male heir. We've gotten closer to uncovering the truth though recently in 2015, when Nicholas Reeves and Mamdouh El-Damadi found what they think is a hidden doorway in King Tut's tomb that contains perhaps the sarcophagus of the lost queen. I'll get into that shortly, but first we need to talk about her modern day origins. Number 8. Berlin bust. Perhaps one of the most popular ancient sculptures of all time was found on December 6, 1913. German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt found this on the floor of the Royal Sculptures Workshop. This figure has some unforgettable details. I mean, first of all, she's breathtaking to look at, and the blue headpiece. These are all important. It was clear that this was Queen Nefertiti from the start. The German team split everything with the Egyptian government, so currently this bust is being held in Berlin. It draws in about 50,000 visitors a year to Berlin's newest museum, a little piece of Egypt all the way over there. We love it. Now, fun little fact about this modern bust, in 2009 there were scans done to it, technology, nice, and it's revealed that underneath this painted layer is limestone carving of a woman so detailed that you can see wrinkles in her cheeks, even a bump on her nose as well. That's like 4K Egypt, it's crazy. Back in 2016, these two artists secretly 3D scanned the bust of the lost queen and then straight up released the files online as a free download. The future is here, I guess. Also, that's a little invasive. Just scanning your head, like that's really? But 3 years later, officials decided to release that to the public, so here it is, take a look. Queen Nefertiti 3D bust. Scanned by James Bond secretly.
Number 7. Bedtime with Caesar. When I said she was a cunning warrior and would do whatever it takes to be a great leader, I meant it. Cleopatra knew how to control the politics around her and the men who held power. She gave the thing that all men can't resist. Yes, that's right. Throwing rocks in a river. It's our favorite pastime. We just love doing it. I don't know. I'm just kidding. It was actually all the other stuff like wealth, power, and the devil's bedroom dance. You know what I'm talking about. Cleopatra had the men wrapped around her finger. All was going great if it weren't for a little political strife in Rome. She ended up with Mark Antony, then Octavian, aka Augustus. He was on the rise to power. When the curtains closed, a republic had fallen, and an empire was here to stay for a long time. Long enough for a whiny teenager from Tosche Station to destroy a space station. Or something like that.
Number 6. Trendsetter. Maybe you knew, maybe you didn't, but in 44 BC, Cleopatra went back to Rome with Julius Caesar as his not-so-subtle side chick, bringing their not-so-subtly named son, Caesarion, with them. And while he was totally with Calpurnia at the time, he even built a statue for Cleopatra in the Temple of Venus. This was pretty scandalous and had a lot of people doing the side-eye emoji, but it also had a lot of people being like, damn, look at this Egyptian lady, look at her style, her hair, her clothes. Our girl Cleopatra had an impact on the fashion in Rome, even if she was only there for 2 years until her mans got punctured like a fresh new bubble tea, except he was punctured 22 more times.
Number 5. Isis Reborn. The Greeks called her Acid. She is an acid. I don't know. God of the Moon, the goddess of life and magic, a protector to women and children. Yes, the goddess of the moon was quite important to Egyptian mythology. What if you could convince the people that you were a god? What if you were actually the goddess of magic and healing, and a protector of the women and children? Anyone who works for PR can tell you how important self-image is, especially when you're the gal in charge. Statues of the goddess asset were made in Cleopatra's likeness, and her public image became that of an all-important goddess. I wish I was the goddess of healing and magic, but I'll settle for king of the hive.
Number 4. Drinking buddies. So, after her last Roman boyfriend got, Cleopatra found a new lover in the Roman general Mark Antony. While it was a political move to have protection, it was also because they genuinely enjoyed each other's company. They even had a drinking club, which honestly would be kind of cute if it wasn't for the scandals and war, and honestly pretty much everything else. The inimitable livers is what they called themselves, and they spent the winter of 40 and 41 BC living it up, drinking and feasting almost every night. They had games and contests, and apparently these two lovebirds would dress up in disguises and go out into Alexandria and play pranks on people. Now that is actually pretty cute, I won't lie. It's pretty cute.
Number 3. Brief ruling. The queen was the stepmother of King Tut. Her daughter was married to King Tut, so there's a handful of Egyptologists that believe that right before King Tut's ruling in the 14th century, there was this really small window where Nefertiti ruled as pharaoh. There's also a great deal of historians that believe Nefertiti was no ruler to her husband, King Akhenaten, but we don't have enough evidence quite yet to really know what happened. Hence why we're doing a mystery video on the long lost queen. Now we get it. The reason we're adamant on finding everything we can is because she literally changed Egyptian religion. Number 2. Her family. The queen's name translates to a beautiful woman has come, and given the fact that we still don't know her parentage, we have to use our national treasure brains here. A beautiful woman has come. Come from where? Well, early Egyptologists believe that Queen Nefertiti came from Syria. Back then, it was Mitanni. Her family roots are still debatable, but there's reason to believe that Nefertiti was actually Egyptian born. In fact, many believe she's related to King Akhenaten. We don't really know. The lost queen did have children of her own. She had 6 daughters, like I mentioned before, 2 of which became queens of Egypt. She may have also been the daughter of A, who at the time was an advisor for the king and ended up becoming pharaoh after King Tut's death in 1323. So we have no idea, but we're getting so close. I feel like we're like years away from finding everything we need to know, but also this last point is pretty interesting. Number 1, sun god origins. Okay, one of the most interesting facts about all of this was the religious impact that the queen made on ancient Egypt. Both her and King Akhenaten were in a cult. How fascinating is that? They were in the cult of the sun god Aton. In the earliest accounts of the queen, she assisted her husband in a ritual that smited the female enemies of Egypt at the time. There have been a few blocks that have since been recovered from the Theban tombs of the royal butler that depicts the queen wearing her unique blue crown, so definitely her, part of these sun god rituals. So cut to the end of the king's ruling, the Aton was now Egypt's main god. She made a new god. She convinced everyone to believe in a new god. That's incredible. We can't even decide on who's gonna win America's Got Talent. She's like trading in traditions and religions. That's wild.
At number 10, birthday. I would have thought that Jesus' birthday would have been one of the most straightforward things about him in regards to facts about him, but apparently his birthday is one of the biggest mysteries that surround him. Though many people believe that Jesus was born on December 25th, aka Christmas, cause happy birthday Jesus, there's a debate that suggests that the date that a lot of people celebrate as Jesus' birthday is incorrect. In 2008, an astronomer named David Reinecke suggested that the Star of Bethlehem, a celestial event commonly associated with Jesus' birth, may have actually been a phenomenon where the planets Venus and Jupiter came together to form a bright light in the sky. Using computer modeling, David was able to determine that this celestial event took place sometime around June 17th in the year 2 BCE. This means that perhaps Jesus was a Gemini, not a Sagittarius, whatever that means. Other researchers have placed Jesus' birth sometime in October of the year 7 BCE, and others have suggested that Jesus was born sometime in the spring because of the tales of his birth mentioning shepherds watching over their flock on the night that Jesus was born, which is something that would have been done in the spring and not the winter.
Number 9, where was he born? So we've covered what day he was born, and it turns out Christmas in October sounds pretty awesome. Let's just combine our favorite holidays and get it done with. But now we have to cover the next important topic. Where was he born? Well, according to biblical sources, Jesus was born in Bethlehem. This is widely known at this point, but perhaps it's not completely accurate. The New Testament Gospels don't agree on this. They don't believe Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Some of them don't even mention it once. In fact, some don't mention the Lord at all. Biblical studies are asking why Jesus was called a Nazarene and a Galilean through the New Testament, and with no mention of his birthplace, obviously people will ask questions. Was he born in Nazareth? Well, Philip J. King answered this question in his Biblical Views column. He said the towns of Bethlehem is traditionally Jesus' birthplace, and Nazareth is Jesus' home. It's like when you say you're from the city, but you're not really from the city. You know what I mean?
And number 8, married. Out of the things that we know about Jesus Christ, one thing that remains unsolved is his marital status. Was Jesus married or not? Obviously, they didn't have Tinder back then to meet people, and there was no MySpace top 10 to really give us a clue of who Jesus was close to, so really we only have speculation, theories, and some clues to go off to try and solve the mystery of whether or not Jesus had a wife. Some biblical scholars have suggested that Jesus was married and that his wife was Mary Magdalene, a woman who was frequently mentioned in the New Testament. In the Gospel of Philip, there is evidence to suggest that Jesus was married, as there are words in the manuscript that read, quote, "There were 3 who always walked with the Lord, Mary his mother, her sister, and Magdalene, the one who was called his companion," end quote. On top of that, in a recently discovered scrap of papyrus known as the Gospel of Jesus' Wife, the document contained lines which said, quote, "Jesus said to them, 'My wife,'" end quote. There is no definite proof of whether or not Jesus was married in fact or not, so this remains a mystery.
Number 7, monuments men. It wasn't always a smooth ride for this specific bust. Sometimes it was a bust. I had to, why not? She spent 11 years in the private residence of Germany's expedition founder, Jacques Simon. Cut to 9 years later, that's when King Tut's tomb was discovered, a totally separate event, unbeknownst to them, connected. Howard Carter found King Tut's tomb in 1922, and of course afterwards the entire world was watching. Just a year later, her bust was finally moved to Berlin. It had a rocky go. It remained in Germans' hands throughout the entire war. Even that big ugly dude with the little mustache said that he himself would never relinquish the head of the queen. So, thanks, Spittler. I can't say his name because YouTube. It was hidden in a salt mine throughout the entire Cold War. The Germans would arrive too late though sometimes when stealing rich pieces of art. Like in 1940 for example, they arrived at the Louvre and it was bare. The Mona Lisa was now in a child's bedroom. Curators had moved the pieces, thankfully. But when a bust of a long lost queen of Egypt was being held in a salt mine in the town of Merkers, the monuments men literally saved history. When Sergeant Kenneth C. Lindsay led his team down the 35 miles of tunnel, and aside from the queen's bust, billions of dollars of gold was also found down there, all stolen from the Germans. Number 6. Hidden chamber. Ancient Egyptian architecture is mind-blowing. Even to this day, we're trying to figure out how exactly everything was built. More and more secrets are coming out of all these hidden tombs. It's fascinating. Technology is for sure a helping hand when it comes to learning about our past queens and kings. And for Queen Nefertiti, her final resting place is now believed to be in a secret chamber in King Tut's tomb. This was years ago. Egypt tourist minister Hisham Zazou said the discovery was like a big bang. And I see no lies. It's perhaps one of the biggest discoveries of the 21st century. After radar tests were conducted, Egyptian officials were 90% sure they found a hidden chamber. And it was also full of treasures, so that's neat. And also, we're onto something. Number 5. Original plans. Another theory that surrounds the queen is that King Tut's chamber was actually meant for her. Yeah, listen to this. The former antiquities minister doesn't believe this. He strongly stands by his belief that the lost queen was one of the female mummies found in the Valley of the Kings. What's compelling here though is that King Tut passed away at age 19, so many believe his own burial chamber hadn't even been built yet, or finished at least. So instead, they used hers. But a radar survey around the tomb in the Valley of the Kings shows us this hidden chamber behind the north wall of the burial chamber. It's been said before that King Tut's chamber was way too small and there must be more. His stepmom being buried in the same tomb, well, that's certainly a start. We're onto something. Number 4. Tomb alignment. Nobody knows angles like ancient Egyptians. The way they built the pyramids, I mean, they still stand today confidently. We're trying to figure out just how they made the pyramids in the first place. Meanwhile, there's a team inside the pyramids trying to figure out who is even buried in the walls. It's a whole fascinating mystery. Using ground-penetrating radar, researchers were able to find this corridor, this log opening in the bedrock at the exact same depth of King Tut's chamber. And on top of that, these openings are facing the same direction. Tomb KV62 and this new chamber have the same orientation, so of course we're going to believe that they're connected. Because unconnected tombs don't often align, or don't ever align really, so that's also a sign. We're getting close. Let's just Give me a shovel, I'll get in there, I'll help out. Be so gentle with everything. I'll feather things off. I've seen National Treasure. Number 3, pagan god. One of the biggest mysteries surrounding Jesus Christ, many believe, is that he was a pagan god. Typically, Jesus is compared to gods like Horus or Osiris, but deities were also born from a virgin. Deities also referred to themselves as the Son of God. They too performed miracles. They also died and came back. Authors of the book The Jesus Mysteries, Timothy Freak and Peter Gandy, believe that Christianity wasn't this new revelation, and in fact, it was a continuation of paganism, just with a new name. They believe the story of Jesus is not the late tale of a Messiah, but rather a Jewish reworking of pagan myth, particularly the god Osiris Dionysus, which had already been widely known about in the ancient Mediterranean. Osiris Dionysus, born on the same day, before 3 shepherds, offered his followers baptism and then died at Easter. These guys go off in this book, and they blame humans for not understanding ancient spirituality enough to recognize that these were just in fact myths, retelling older myths to create newer ones that was normal in the ancient world.
At number 2, walking on water. Perhaps the biggest mystery surrounding Jesus Christ is whether it is true that he really did walk on water. Jesus is said to have performed a number of miracles, but one of his most famous ones was walking on water. People have been trying to explain this phenomenon for ages, but it still remains a mystery. Jesus claimed to have walked on the water of the Sea of Galilee, and research suggests that this might be true, however the water might have been frozen at the time. Researchers have suggested that there might have been a cold snap that caused the freshwater lake to freeze over, and Jesus could have just stood on a floating patch of ice, and this could explain the phenomenon, but it's not exactly confirmed.
And finally, number 1, water into wine. Okay, so now we're getting into some party tricks that Jesus could pull off. The whole walking on water thing is pretty impressive, but when he turns water into wine, okay, now we're talking. But where did this come from? Could he really do that? Make mythological Merlot? On the 3rd day, there was a wedding in Galilee. Jesus was there, and so was his mother Mary. And like most weddings, there was a fair amount of wine spilled. So much so that they ran out. Sounds like a pretty good wedding. There were, however, 6 jars of water nearby, and when some was gifted to the master of the banquet, he was shocked. After all that wine, he said, this was the best of the night, and it was just a jar of water a minute ago. This is mind-blowing. This is one of the biggest things that we talk about when it comes to J-bones. This was one of the earliest signs that revealed his glory. Did Jesus alter the molecular composition of water? Maybe, but was it wine or was it really grape juice? After all that wine that they bragged about drinking, maybe the best wine that was saved for last was actually flavored water and they were in fact hammered. The first sip of water after a night out tastes pretty amazing, so I'd be confused too.
At number 10, inventions. Leonardo da Vinci was quite the smarty pants. We all know him mostly for his paintings, however he was so much more than just a mere artiste. Da Vinci was famous for his designs and art, as well as cartography, geology, and other studies. What's most impressive about Da Vinci are his inventions, because he drew or described a number of devices that wouldn't be fully realized until centuries later. Some of his inventions include an underwater diving suit, like a scuba suit, an armored tank, a calculator, the machine gun, a keyboard, construction crane, a robot, and a flying machine. We have all of these things today, but back in Da Vinci's time, these inventions were quite bold. Leonardo conceptualized the armored tank 400 years before this invention was actually realized and used in World War I. Many of Da Vinci's inventions went unpublished during his life, and his notes and inventions were just passed on and created without giving Da Vinci credit, but as we find more and more of Da Vinci's lost notes, we are seeing just how many things he was inventing and how he's shaped our world so significantly. I wonder what other things Leo invented that we don't know about. At number 9, his lovers. Not much is known about Leonardo da Vinci's personal life. We know that he was never married, but that doesn't mean that the artist didn't have a love life. It is believed that Da Vinci had a couple of lovers throughout his life, but there's no solid proof, only speculation and theories. Though we may never know for certain what his sexuality was, there are theories that suggest that Da Vinci was into men. Many people believe that at one point Da Vinci had some kind of relationship with his mentor, Andrea del Verrocchio, outside of their mentor-mentee partnership. There is also speculation that 2 of Da Vinci's students were also his lovers, Gian Giacomo Caprotti and Francesco Melzi. Both joined Da Vinci's atelier when they were 10 and 15 respectively, but it is believed that there were romantic ties between them. Caprotti is thought to have been Da Vinci's favorite, and he even left Caprotti a mysterious inheritance in his will when he died. Back in Renaissance Italy, homosexuality was illegal, so if they were really Leonardo's lovers, they they would have needed to keep things very secret. There was a report filed against Da Vinci alluding to his sexuality, but because they were anonymous, the charges against the artist were dropped. Before we carry on talking about the mysterious life of Leonardo da Vinci, let me first take a moment to ask you guys to consider leaving a like on this video if you're enjoying it so far, and maybe even consider subscribing to the channel to see more videos like this one. At number 8, Mona Lisa smirk. For some reason, people for years have been so obsessed with the Mona Lisa and her mysterious smirk. I mean, I don't really get what's so mysterious about it, but apparently it has been a hot topic in the art world. For years, people have been trying to piece together who Mona Lisa was and why she was smiling like that. Scans of the famous paintings have revealed many secrets, and countless scientists took a stab at trying to crack the case on this whole Mona Lisa mystery, but it seems like one person is thought to have figured out why Mona Lisa looks the way she does. Dr. Mandeep R. Mehra, a physician from Boston, was standing in line to view the painting when he noticed her, quote, sallow complexion, thinning hair, and misaligned smile, end quote. It was then that he diagnosed the woman in the painting with hypothyroidism. He suggested that her odd smile could have been connected to muscle weakness caused by her potential hypothyroidism. This, combined with her thin and receding hairline, a bump next to her left eye, lack of eyebrow hair, yellow skin, and bump on her neck, suggested that she was suffering from this glandular condition. To back up this theory, research was done on food that women would have eaten at the time that this painting was done, and because they ate a relatively iodine-deficient diet, this could have caused the development of hypothyroidism, since iodine is essential in maintaining thyroid health.
Number 7. Jesus' body. We haven't found the body of Jesus, of course, thousands of years later. This task is proving to be quite difficult. And according to the Bible, Jesus died but returned after 3 days and then suddenly vanished. His body is said to just not exist anymore. Where's the body? Where did it go? Did someone steal it? Let's talk. In order to preserve a body in the first place for that amount of time, you need to be a pro at mummification, and Romans nor Jews practiced such a thing at that time. So if you did find a tomb, the tomb of Jesus per se, his bones, well, they turned to dust about 100 years after his death, so it would be empty. There's many who believe the body of Jesus was removed from the tomb before Easter Sunday, or like I said, it was stolen. Either way, it was for sure empty. The Romans were in charge of law and order at this time, so there's also a theory where Romans took his body, but there's no motivation there that checks out. Because if they stole a body, they could have brought it out at any time and then halted Christian faith. Did Jesus' disciples take the body as well? Still the biggest mystery right here, folks.
At number 6, crucified. The crucifixion of Jesus Christ is seen as one of the most important events in the Christian gospel. According to the gospel, Jesus was crucified at the hands of Pontius Pilate, and the skies darkened for hours afterwards. Some see this event as a miracle or an omen of dark times that lied ahead. Some researchers have tried to explain this phenomenon using astronomy. Some tie the event of Jesus' crucifixion to a solar eclipse that lasted 2 minutes in 29 CE, and others say that a second total eclipse caused the darkness over 4 minutes back in 33 CE. Either way, this phenomenon is still inexplicable and remains yet another mystery.
Number 5. Resurrection. On the 3rd day after his crucifixion, Christ was resurrected. We call this event Easter. It's a major feast day of the church, and these accounts of Christ being reborn can now be found in the 4 Gospels: Mark, Luke, Matthew, and John. In the letters of the Apostle Paul, found in the New Testament, it's again stated that Christ rose from the dead. Now, some are convinced that disciples of the Lord were not telling lies, but even so, Jesus could have been resurrected in a non-physical form. But in Luke 24:39, Jesus himself denied that he was a spirit. He said, "Look at my hands and my feet, it is myself. Touch me and see, a ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have." The disciples were also the first non-believers too, Luke 24:11, and these words appealed to them as nonsense and they would not believe in them. The risen Christ appeared to his disciples in the upper room, which was behind locked doors, and then he disappeared in front of their eyes. But how? The resurrection of Jesus Christ, of course, is one of the biggest mysteries.
At number 4, the Shroud of Turin. The Shroud of Turin has been highly debated and, dare I say, shrouded in mystery. The shroud is said to have covered Jesus' body after the crucifixion and shows a faint image of a man's face and torso, believed to be Jesus himself. This find has been debated for years, and the more research and testing people do, the more muddled things get. The search for the shroud's authenticity has been going on for decades, and there's still no definitive definitive answer of whether it is real or not, and if the face and torso seen in the shroud really do belong to Jesus as well. The Catholic Church doesn't have a stance on whether or not the shroud is authentic, but science is determined to get to the bottom of this mystery. Carbon dating has suggested that the cloth is less than 8,000 years old, meaning that it may have come from sometime in the Middle Ages. But a study done in 2014 suggested that perhaps an ancient earthquake that affected Jerusalem may have created an ionic image in the shroud as well as, quote, altered the radiocarbon levels that later suggested that the shroud was a medieval forgery, end quote. Right now, there are more questions to be answered than ever before, so it may be a while before this mystery is solved. At number 3, dissection. Much like a lot of thinkers from back in the day, Leonardo da Vinci was curious about anatomy. His studies of anatomy first began as research for his paintings. He wanted to be as accurate to the human form as possible, and apparently he was quite a stickler about that. But later on, that research turned into a full-blown fascination for da Vinci. He went from merely researching anatomy to seeking a deeper understanding of the physiology of living things. As part of his research, Leonardo da Vinci was known to dissect human and animal bodies. He was fascinated by physiology, and there was no limits to how far he would go out of curiosity. He was known to have removed a human eyeball and sliced it open to better understand its function and how it worked. Quite strange, but clearly it helped him out in his art, so as long as the people he was dissecting had already kicked the bucket, then all power to you, Leo. At number 2, where is Leonardo? One of the biggest mysteries about the end of Leonardo da Vinci's life is, where the heck is he? No one really knows what happened to the famed painter's remains. His tomb no longer exists, and his bones are nowhere to be found. When he died, he was buried at the Church of Saint Florentin in Amboise, France, but in the early 1800s, after years of erosion and revolutionary vandalism, the chapel needed to be repaired, and they used gravestones and tombstones to repair the building. Children were known to play with the abandoned bones from the graveyard, and so a gardener gathered the bones and buried them. None of the remains have really ever been pieced together, so they remain lost. It is believed that Leonardo's remains could have ended up in the castle of Amboise, but we don't really know if they're actually his remains or not. And finally, at number 1, ciphers and encryptions. Leonardo da Vinci created a lot of mysteries for us to solve in modern day, but he was quite the mysterious man himself because he was known to use codes and encryptions. All of his notes were written backwards with a mirror, and though it isn't known for certain why he did this, many believe that it was to protect his inventions and other notes from falling into the wrong hands. Though it's a pretty easy encryption to figure out, to the average wandering person, the notes would have just looked like gibberish. Other people believe that he wrote everything backwards because he was left-handed and it was just easier for him to write backwards. Leonardo just did everything differently, which made him a little weird to some, but a genius to many others.
Number 10. Not all looks. History is written by the victors. In this case, the Romans, who liked to paint Cleopatra here as a sinful seductress in the night. And in a lot of our media, she is portrayed just that way. But that may have not been totally the case. At least, she wasn't all looks. According to historians, she was a scholar, and she enjoyed the company of other scholars. She probably knew a dozen different languages, and she was well versed in mathematics, philosophy, oratory, and astronomy. If that weren't enough, apparently it's possible she wasn't actually as attractive as we think. A lot of coins and some art display her with somewhat masculine features. I mean, maybe that was considered attractive. But some people believe these coins just show these features to make her look more powerful, as most rulers back in the day were men. She was a female pharaoh of Egypt. There's only a slim chance she was not an incredibly intelligent person. We just don't know for sure.
Number 9, the last pharaoh of Egypt. She was the last pharaoh of Egypt, and what may come as a surprise to some, she wasn't actually Egyptian. Okay, yes, she was born in Egypt, but she was of Macedonian descent. However, what's more mysterious than that is her passing. After a bunch of political misfortune that I'm sure Adam will get into at a later point, the last pharaoh that we knew, she was about to lose her kingdom, so in true dramatic form, she allowed 2 asps to bite her, releasing her from this mortal realm. This may or may not be true, something that has been spun up since her absence. Sure, there's truth in everything, but we'll never really know. One thing's for sure, she was a cunning leader and did whatever it took to be a leader.
Number 8. Sibling rivalry. Look, back in the day, power was something that drove people to do some not so savory things. like turning on your brother husband and starting a civil war for sole possession of the throne, teaming up with the ruler of a much stronger empire, and taking out anyone who was your potential rival. And I don't mean taking them out on a date. Cleopatra may or may not have had a hand in the untimely demise of her first and second brother husbands, Ptolemy the 13th and 14th. The first for not letting her have full power, and the second one so that she could make her son co-ruler. But it doesn't stop there. She was almost definitely responsible for the execution of her sister Arsinoe. Brother husbands and non-accidental fatal incidents. I'm not really a fan of this.
At number 7, his mother. As I mentioned earlier, Da Vinci's personal life had its own mysteries. One of the greater mysteries from Leonardo da Vinci's life is his mother. No one really knows who she was or where she came from, but there are a handful of theories. What we do know of his early life is that Leonardo was born on April 15, 1452. His father was Piero, a Florentine notary who was a famous womanizer, and his mother was Caterina. But other than her name, not much else is known about Caterina. The reason we don't know much about her is because she really wasn't in Leonardo's life. She spent little time with him and she sent him to live with his father. Historians have been able to narrow down a couple of people who could have been Leonardo's mother. She could have been Caterina di Mio di Lippo, who was a pauper from a neglected farm, or she could have been Caterina di Antonio di Cambio, who was the daughter of small landowners. It is also theorized that Caterina could have been a former slave from the Middle East because the name Caterina was a common name among women who converted to Catholicism, and since analysis of Leonardo's fingerprint indicated traits commonly found in people of Arabic descent, this could actually back up that theory. At number 6, The Last Supper. Many of Leonardo da Vinci's paintings are shrouded in mystery. There are many mysteries surrounding the Mona Lisa, other than the one I previously mentioned, and there are a couple of other pieces with a lot of unanswered questions, but let me tell you about one of the mysteries surrounding da Vinci's The Last Supper. The Last Supper is a depiction of Jesus and his disciples at the last Passover meal before Jesus' crucifixion. Though it looks like a normal painting, there are hidden Easter eggs that raise some questions. Dan Brown, the author of the Da Vinci Code, came up with a theory that Mary Magdalene is depicted in the painting. Mary Magdalene is thought to have potentially been Jesus' wife, and according to Dan Brown, the disciple in the painting that was previously identified as John was actually Mary Magdalene because this person had softer features that could be perceived as feminine. There is a counter-argument to this theory, saying that the softer features in the painting were more so to depict the youth of the disciple John because he was the youngest of Jesus' disciples. But what do you guys think? Is there actually merit to this theory? At number 5, Unfinished. From what we've learned about Leonardo da Vinci, he seemed like the type of person who marched to the beat of his own drum. He did whatever he wanted, when he wanted, and no one could tell him otherwise. Or at least that's how I perceive him anyway. But I think that this perception of him could also be backed up by the fact that he apparently rarely ever finished his work. Apparently, Da Vinci was known to leave commissions and his own personal works unfinished. He was a meh, not really feeling this one right now kind of guy. Turns out the Mona Lisa was actually a commissioned project from a wealthy silk merchant to the Medici, and he never received the painting. Some of Da Vinci's other works, like the Sforza Horse Monument and the Battle of Anghiari mural, were also abandoned and never completed by the artist. As you can imagine, his clients would often hound and harass Leonardo for the completed pieces that he often never even started. He got so tired of painting later in life that he said that he could not even bear the sight of a paintbrush. I have to say, I kind of feel bad for the people who never got their commission pieces because I'm sure they would have been quite incredible. At number 4, Salvator Mundi. Here's another one of Leonardo da Vinci's pieces that is shrouded in mystery. Salvator Mundi is one of da Vinci's paintings that has a lot of unanswered questions. People have wondered about the orb in the painting that's held by Jesus. People who know da Vinci's work notice that there is no refraction in the orb, which is uncharacteristic of da Vinci because he knew all about the physics there. But this mystery opened up a whole new jar of worms and a new question, that is, did Leonardo da Vinci even paint Salvator Mundi? And the answer is actually no. I know, crazy, right? For all these years we thought that this was a Da Vinci original, but it turns out that only about 20% of the painting was actually done by Da Vinci himself. After analyzing the painting's artistic details and painting techniques, it is believed that Leonardo's assistant, Bernardino Luini, was the one to paint the majority of this piece. Luini was a painter in his own right, but his pieces never really fetched as much money as Da Vinci's. Adding to all of this painting drama though, it is believed that Leonardo only completed about 15 paintings in his entire lifetime, so there's something to think about.
Number 3. Theatrics. When I was a young lad in every classroom I was ever in, the teacher, no matter how young or old, had a variation of this to say to me. Nice teachers would say this: "Andrew, you have a lot of energy. Let's try and focus." The mean teachers would say, "Shut up and read your book." What am I getting at here? Well, in my mind, just because it was math class, that didn't mean it wasn't a stand-up comedy stage. Just how it goes. Cleopatra also felt this in her heart. No, not comedy, theater, or drama, just being extra, very extra. The whole revealing yourself by unraveling a rug is the definition of theater. There's also the whole Elizabeth Taylor connection. If you've ever seen the movie Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor, then you know what I'm talking about. This also could be directly because of that, and for those who think Cleopatra, they probably think of Elizabeth Taylor, which is very,
Number 2. Forever young. You know, for all the things she did and who she was in history, Cleopatra did not live an incredibly long life. She actually only lived to be 39, dying in 30 BC. She brought the end of an era, one that had been around since 3100 BC. The line of pharaohs was Egypt's way of life for over 3,000 years, and Cleopatra left us only 2,051 years ago. This isn't so much a mysterious point about Cleopatra, it's more like a mysterious point about Egypt and pharaohs in general. What is cool is that for the last 300 years before Cleopatra VII, her family had spoke only Greek, and the very last one in their line, the very last pharaoh of Egypt, who closed out a 3,000-year-long tradition, was the first and last Ptolemaic ruler who decided to actually learn how to speak Egyptian and who embraced the Egyptian culture that she was the ruler of.
Number 1. Rumors and hearsay. Look, we've talked about a lot of stuff here on this list, but the trouble is we can't be too sure of what is true and what's Hollywood. The classical historical equation of a long time ago plus not enough primary sources of information multiplied by 2 cute internet hosts, well, we just don't know. We'd love to bring you the cold hard history facts with just a sprinkle of funny in there, but this list was difficult. So if you guys know anything about Cleopatra and her mysteries, please share. I'd love to hear it. Let us know in the comments below. But the truth is, there's just a lot of mystery surrounding the gal. That's just how it goes.